Hey, it's Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this may be the last to-back or not-to-back of the year, and even then, it's still going to be a fairly short and condensed one, although, granted, I have no clue how long the actual video will be, because I can go on sometimes. But yeah, this is likely the last to-back or not-to-back of the year. As of right now, I think there are like 2 or 3 campaigns that I actually care about in the next 3 weeks, and I don't know if that's enough for a dedicated video, so we'll see. I may talk about stuff again, I don't really know. Just stay tuned for the ride, because we'll find out together. Past that, if there's not a to-back or not-to-back every Monday, then there will be an alternate video instead, something to do with Kickstarter. One video idea that was suggested that I particularly like that I'm probably going to go with is the Kickstarters that I have been waiting on the longest, that I'm still waiting on, that are just sitting there, and not to drive hate towards people, but definitely just to talk about those things, and the delays, and the conversation, and then COVID escalating things, and all those stuff. Either way, let's go ahead and jump into today's video. This is to-back and not-to-back. We'll be going over all the Kickstarters and game founds, talking about the various campaigns. Starting off the bat with some general updates, Call of Kilforth, a Fantasy Quest game. This was supposed to be launching already. They pushed it off till next week. Like I just said, I probably or may not be doing another to-back or not-to-back, which means I may not have an opportunity to talk about this game. So in the case I don't, well, it's over here, and you can go ahead and follow it or whatnot, so you can back it. Maybe I'll have a chance to talk about it, maybe not, I don't know, but I wanted you to, at the very least, be aware of it so you can, follow and make choices accordingly. So that'll be linked down below. Speaking of things that were delayed, we also have Encyclopedia, a game that I've really been enjoying by Holy Grail Games. And if you've heard me say I've really been enjoying it a few times now, it's because I've really been enjoying it. And the last time I said that about a game, not necessarily the last time, but I said it about Pachamama on GameFound, and people did not back that one, and I'm still upset. It's coming back, of course, but I'm still upset that it did not fund. I would really like Encyclopedia to fund because I like this game. It's a really good game. This is from the designers of Dominations, Road to Civilization, and Museum. I haven't played Museum. I played Dominations, enjoyed it, but didn't keep it. Encyclopedia is easily my favorite of those 3. Granted, I've only played 2 of them, so it's not really a huge selection, but Encyclopedia is a really solid game. This one got pushed off till, I want to say March. I want to say it got pushed off till, here we go. It'll be crowdfunding in March 2022. They pushed it off. It was originally going to be December. I think it was originally going to be November even. Either way, it's pushed off for a while now. There's no page to follow just yet, but rest assured I will be talking about this. I will be covering it. I have a copy upstairs right now, and I've played it a whole bunch of times, and now I'm taking the time that they've given me, the extra space, to potentially dive into this one solo and see if it is or isn't a game for me as far as solo play. So we'll find out together, but if I have a chance. Next up in terms of announcements, one more thing happening, which is this Ancient Blood, The Order of the Vampire Hunters. This is launching on GameFound, 6,000 people following it. This is the successor to The Order of the Vampire Hunters, but it's not a sequel. It's not even the same game. It has some elements of the same game system, so there is overlap to some degree, but it's a very different beast. They are taking a new approach to the game and keeping some of the core mechanics there, but also making it very different. So I do not believe it's compatible with the other one. I don't know if they'll have a compatibility pack where you can upgrade or whatever. I have no clue, but this is going to be launching over on GameFound. This, like Call of Kilforth, I believe is launching on the 14th, so very, very shortly, but not in time for this video, which means, once again, I may or may not have a chance to talk about these games. Now, granted, I sometimes do should you back at videos when campaigns have enough of a following, enough of a reason to do so. It could be that on either Ancient Blood or Call of Kilforth, I'll actually do one of those, or perhaps I'll do one together for them. I'm playing up at air. I make no guarantees. In case I can't cover it, I just want you to be aware so you can understand that this is a thing and jump in on it accordingly. I will be reviewing this one. I'll have a review going up tomorrow on this, so you can check that out. And that is all the stuff before we get into the still not the new campaigns. Starting off with Board Game Adjacent. One already ended and one not funding. This is what happens when you miss a week on to-back or not-to-back. We have Adventures in Academia, First Class. This is Board Game Adjacent. This is Russ Charles in association with Steamforge Games. They do these RPG games as well. I don't cover RPGs, which is why I don't play RPGs, which is why I don't really cover or get these games. The miniatures always pull me in. There's a whole late backer pledge over here, late pledge, which is why I'm still bringing it to your attention. I'm not heavily going to go into it because I don't know enough about it to heavily go into it. But Adventures in Academia is basically First Class. It's a bunch of miniatures, introducing, younger characters in the D&D system, giving you miniatures, backstories, or whatever stuff's going on. And if I said anything that's remotely inaccurate, that's because I have no idea, because I don't do D&D in the slightest. And no, I did not heavily research the page past looking at the miniatures, and yes, they are very, very fun looking. Not as cool looking as all the pets and the cats and the animals and the walruses that they had. Is it walruses or walrusi? Let's go with Walrusai. It's probably not, but I like it. The all Walrusai that they had in their animal adventures, whatever it was, but this is still pretty solid miniatures, all things considered. Next up, we have the Young Board Gamer scratch poster over on GameFound with 28 backers. This is getting no traction. Granted, I didn't know it was a thing until part of my process is that I follow various channels. I follow Shelf Clutter, I follow various Board Game Geek threads, and of course I'm subscribed to a million creators, and I get notifications myself directly from creators, all of which will give me a 98% accurate package of the things that I would want to cover for this channel. Things slip in, by the way. Things occasionally get missed, so there are things that get missed, but most of the time I cover the things that I would have wanted to cover. They come through my various sources of information. But this one completely missed it. The only reason I know about this at all is because as a final step every single week, a final step that I do is I actually just go ahead and I browse GameFound and Kickstarter, literally just looking for, hey, you, the platforms, do you want to show me something that I haven't seen anywhere else? And I saw the Young Board Gamer scratch poster specifically because I was looking for things for this video. So that's the only reason I found it. 28 backers, 13 days left. This is basically, you've probably seen it before, you may or may not, depending on the forums you frequent and all that stuff, but they have this top 100 scratch-off poster you can buy. They've done a few iterations of it with different, games on it, different promo things, whatever it is, but it's basically a scratch-off poster so you can check off your way through the top 100, obviously fixed in at a point in time. That may change as time goes on, but that's what this company does, and they're doing this for the young board gamers. So we have Flam Rogue, we have Century, we have Baron Park, we have a bunch of... It's not kids games. This is not kids games. This is the young board gamer. The idea of it giving you 32 top board games for young board gamers according to Board Game Geek. I don't know what all the games are. There's 9 avatar stickers to personalize it to whatever you want, and then you could buy, other stuff along with it, all that stuff. Just bringing it to your attention in case you like that concept of the scratch-off poster, which I do. I haven't actually gotten around to it, but, what do we have? We have the Watch It Played Game Shelf scratch-off poster with the Board Games Heroes, a whole bunch of options here. I'll have to look more into these. I like the idea of these things, but ultimately... the reason I haven't gotten these myself, and it's a little different with the young board gamers, the reason I haven't gotten these myself is because generally I play what I want to play, and I do have things that gamify the process to drive me to play games, but it's usually not a top 100 on Board Game Geek. Like, for instance, on that list, I know that on that list is going to be Twilight Imperium, and I'm not playing Twilight Imperium anytime soon, so why should I get a thing that I know I'm not completing, which is the complicated part as to why I haven't been pulled in by these posters just yet. So, I wonder if there's a list of the 32 games on this poster, because I think that would be helpful, because if I know that they're games that I own or games that I want to track down, then I'd be more incentivized to try to grab them and see if I can, do this with my daughter, and she'd love the idea of scratching this off. Ooh, look, I played Pandemic. Ooh, look, I played this game. So, fun concept, one that I haven't executed on myself, but letting you know as far as if you are interested, and that's over on GameFound. Then, in terms of cancellations, so those are the two board game adjacents, which brings us on to cancellations and not funding. We don't have anything in the not funding category past the posters we just talked about, but we do have cancellations. So we have cancellations, Spring and Autumn Story of China. This launched over on GameFound, and they did fund, but we've had the conversation in the past about funding, about how well companies do, but they funded, and then they promptly canceled a few days later. This is, I believe, the sequel to the Hellenica game system. This is from, what's the name? Mr. B Games. They've been doing Kickstarters or crowdfunding for 10 years. They have 20 campaigns over on Kickstarter. Some funded, some not. So this is not their first cancellation. It's not. Going back to my GameFound versus Kickstarter video that I did last week, I don't know if this is a GameFound problem. You see, on the one hand, if you look at their track record over on Kickstarter, they have plenty of cancellations that did not, games that just didn't fund at all. So I don't know if I'm willing to blame GameFound right away. The flip side is their Hellenica system does seem to be their game that does tend to do better. So I don't know if people necessarily didn't realize this Hellenica system, or if they didn't migrate over from Kickstarter to GameFound. I don't have any clear answers. I'm certainly not willing to condemn GameFound based on Mr. B Games having a whole bunch of cancellations. That said, I did do a video last week comparing GameFound to Kickstarter, and it does seem on smaller campaigns, smaller GameFound campaigns do seem to struggle a bit more. Not necessarily as much as just looking at them and saying, oh, hey, they canceled, but they do seem to struggle a bit more. But this will be relaunching over on Kickstarter. So they are coming back, they are relaunching, but they're going to do so over on Kickstarter later at some point. So that's unfortunately a cancellation over here, and we can move on to the next one, which is moving into the update category. This video is moving along pretty quickly so far. We're only 9 minutes in, and I'm almost up to the new campaigns, of which there's only 5 or 7 or something. You see, the fun part about these videos is you always know how long I took. I often have no idea until I'm done. You can just look at the time bar and just be like, oh, yeah, that was a 42-minute video. Got it. I have no idea. Weather Machine by Vital Lacerda and Ian O'Toole. No real updates here past the fact that this is your last opportunity to jump on into it. We're at $985,000, which means room and board, if you're watching this, you know what's coming. You have to go ahead and do a should you back it or 5 reasons not to back on Weather Machine because it's about to cross that $1 million mark. Honestly, I'm surprised it took them this long. A new Vital Lacerda game, I would have immediately thought would have hit $1 million. I'm surprised this one did not immediately hit that. Granted, it is much higher in terms of the cost, which means you are basically forcing people to consider, do I want to pick up Weather Machine, or maybe I just go find the older one. Maybe I find, On Mars Kickstarter edition, which I can get anyway because of the price hike. So that could be a factor there. Weather Machine, I'm not backing this one, but I will say, when this campaign launched, I had no interest in backing it, but now I'm kind of interested. You see, I finally actually played my first Lacerda game. I finally played Lisboa, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's not to the point yet where I want to pick up every single Vital Lacerda game just yet, but I certainly am more tempted. I already own Escape Plan, I already own the Gallerist, and I kind of want to get Kanban and Vinhos, and what's the other one, On Mars, and the other. So yeah, maybe I do have the bug. But I'm not picking up Weather Machine just yet. I want to get at least one more play of both Lisboa, as well as a play of another Lacerda. I certainly don't need to hunt them down, but I will say Lisboa is incredibly elegant, very thinky, very heavy, and that's where the challenge comes in for me as far as, do I want to play that, or I'd rather play Castle of Burgundy, which is a little lighter, but just as rewarding in terms of the gameplay, at least for me and what I like in games. So I'm still not completely sold that Lacerda is, the game designer who's going to take over my entire collection, but I absolutely enjoyed Lisboa, and I'm certainly interested in trying out more of his games and seeing where they stack up. But either way, that's kind of a tangent. As far as what's going on over here, this is a typical Lacerda campaign, which means you basically have the core game, which can be available later, and you get all these stretch goals and extras that you could buy in future campaigns. They usually sell them in future campaigns, so you could get access to them. You could hop in the Pledge Manager over here. If you have Lisboa and you don't have the Kickstarter upgrades, like I don't, then you could go ahead and just jump into this campaign and be like, oh, I'm going to check a few boxes, grab those upgrades, and upgrade my retail copy of Lisboa, or of On Mars, or of whatever, to a Kickstarter copy. That's true over here as well. You have the stretch goals, you have the solitaire game, you have the stretch goals, the supply cards, the private objective cards, the in-game goal tiles. These modules they have tend to all fall into the category of things that are great to add to the game once you've played it a time or two. You certainly don't need them out the gate. You certainly do not need them if you already have plenty of unplayed games, but they can be fun little things to mix up the experience once you feel you need something extra to slightly diversify, slightly augment your game experience. And that's basically Weather Machine. And this should hold its value. Overall, most Kickstarter Lacerda games do. The slight difference with Weather Machine is there is a large price hike compared to prior campaigns, which does mean it's slightly more in a question mark territory. I still think it's a safe back. Because I just think that the Lacerda is... I mean, if you look at Lacerda on Board Game Geek, and you look at his games, like, he's like gotta be like the... If you took the average rating of a designer, I wonder, that's a fascinating question. I wonder which designer has the highest average rating across their games, and I would not be surprised. I would think that designer is Lacerda, unless you find someone who has like a single one-hit game. The average rating from designers who have at least 2 games, I think Lacerda likely has the highest average rating, so yeah, I think it'll still hold its value just fine. Moving on to Man vs. Meeple, another update, which this page should load. There we go. $46,000 on a $50,000 goal, 13 days to go. By the time you watch this, like 10, 11 days to go, whatever it is, this means that this will fund. When a campaign is this close to funding, at this point in the campaign, it will fund. That's not even a question at all. They have continued to add promos to the campaign, so for someone like myself who's in at the $60 pledge, you're going to get all the promos, and that's fun because one thing I kind of found it after, so I pinned a comment, but I didn't realize when I was doing my last video 2 weeks ago that not all of these promos are eligible for pick 3. So for instance, I wanted the Vindication promos. That was the easiest one that I wanted the most, and it wasn't even eligible for pick 3, which means that my decision point of, do I just narrow my like 5 or 6 that I want down to 3, or just go for the whole thing, my decision point was made for me, because if I want the Vindication promos, I'll have to pay $60. Now, the good news for me, at least, is that there are enough other promos that I want. I want Ares Expedition, I want the what's called End This Winter, Merchant's Cove I'm okay with. I don't know if Merchant's Cove is going to be a keeper for me long term. It's a game I want to continue playing, but will eventually move on from. Like, I'm certain that Merchant's Cove is not a keeper in my collection. It's just a good experience. There's Trails, which I don't have. There's Hadrian's Wall, which I just played for the first time. That's delightful. We have Critters at War, which I definitely want those over there. We have Mosaic, we have Lost Ruins of Arnak, and then there are more promos that they've slowly been unlocking. We have Golem, which is great because I have Golem, so I'd love to get that. Genotype I don't have. I've heard good things about Genotype. Block and Key, I backed that one, so promos there could be fun. I haven't gotten Cape May, but Agamonia, definitely want promos for Agamonia. That was a great game. So yeah, there's Man vs. Figurine. I like it. They have the title of the card is Man vs. Figurine. But yes, we'll see what else gets added. They've also started adding bundles. If you're in any way interested, I recommend backing at $1, so you'll get updates that will tell you when they're adding the next batch of bundles. They've already done it twice. I don't know if they'll be doing it again. Sadly, I missed out on the Arc Nova bundle. I think there was like one of them or something. I really wanted that one, and I wanted that one before Tom Vassal rated it a 10. I just want to get my hands on Arc Nova because I mean, like, look at this, Arc Nova. I definitely want a copy of Arc Nova. I'll get my hands on it eventually. Either way, that is Man vs. Meeple. Which brings us to new campaigns, and the first new campaign is one that you unfortunately cannot back anymore. Because this is Voyages. Voyages, as of the time you're watching this, has ended, unfortunately, and that's because it falls into that narrow space. Whenever I skip a 2-back or not to back, one of the things that can happen is you can have a situation where my last 2-back or not to back was, what was it? It was, if today's the 10th, today's the 13th, then my last one is Monday the 29th, okay? The 29th of November was my last 2-back or not to back. This campaign launched on the 30th. And then it's ending a day before. It's like a 13-day campaign, perfectly situated so that it misses my 2-back or not to back series, which is unfortunate because it means I can't tell you should get this. Now, I'm not going to tell you should get this. We'll cover that shortly. But what I will say is if you are interested in getting this after I'm done talking about it, they do plan on having some sort of late pledge option, likely through a website. That's likely not going to be set up until either close to the end of the year or next year. Whenever I find out about it, I'll talk about it in my next 2-back or not to back. So if you're interested in this, there will be an opportunity to get your hands on it. What is Voyages? Voyages is a game that is a print and play game, which if you're scared off, as I usually would be, don't be scared off just yet. See, Voyages is a single sheet print at home board game. You're basically paying for the design rights because that's all you're doing. I mean, the people who buy PMPs are going to be familiar with this. I don't ever buy PMPs, so for me it's such a foreign concept. I'd rather buy a physical board game. I don't want to buy your print and play experience. But for $6, roughly $6, £4, you'll buy the game, but more importantly, you're going to be getting, I believe, 3 different maps, if I'm not mistaken. They started with 2, there's going to be a 3rd map that they unlock through stretch goals, and you're going to get all future content for this game. So you get your email on the mailing list, you get all feature content for the game, and you'll go ahead and print these at home to play it. Now, you can do that a few different ways. You can actually physically print the sheets. We haven't talked about the game yet. We'll do that shortly. But you could go ahead and... should we talk about the game first? Let's talk about the options first. So, you can go ahead and print the sheet. That's fine. You can put it in a plastic sleeve and color on the plastic sleeve. That's fine. Or you can go ahead and buy a laminator, which I happen to have a laminator. So this is the one I have at home. Works fairly well. 5,700 ratings, $40. I think I got it on 30 for like sale. You can go ahead and find it on sale at some point, shape, or form. But basically, if you think about it, for the price of $45, you're basically getting a free board game. You're getting it, not free. For a price of $45, you're getting a board game with a free laminator thrown in. Granted, you have to make 2 separate purchases to do so, but you'll also be able to do stuff like this in the future. Having a laminator for board games is a fun little tool. I don't use it all the time, but I certainly use it, and it's a purchase that I got specifically for board games and do not regret getting it. It's a lot easier to deal with than a 3D printer, which I also have, and I've stopped using a few months ago because I need to tweak things, and I don't have time to tweak things right now. But either way, going back to Voyages, Voyages is a game that, like I said, you have a few options as far as how you can do it. I recommend getting it professionally printed. Get a nice color printer or go to a print store, get a professionally printed sheet of the game, and then put it through a laminator, and then boom, there you go. You have your board game component. Do that for 4 sheets, or 5, 6, 7 sheets, because it plays up to 100 players, which is an arbitrary number. It just means it plays for any number of players. In the game, you'll be rolling 3 dice and then trying to move around the board. 1 dice will be used to determine direction. You can see this little direction rondelle over here. The other die will be used to determine how far you move, and the 3rd die is being used to start getting to take care of your duties, which are these little grids for rows and columns. You'll be getting different bonuses on it. So simple roll and write, but to me the appeal of this game, the appeal of Voyages, and that's aside from Rado and Meepletown, who both have solid testimonials for the game, but overall, the game just seems very, very free, very wide open as far as how you explore this board. One of the fun things about games like On Tour is that kind of sense of openness, and I think this one gives you even arguably a better, more open sense to it as far as how you navigate around these islands, trying to gather what you want to ultimately score as many points as possible. And that might seem like it's not a lot of gameplay there, and it may or may not be. It depends on how variable the game experience is and how often you want to dive into it and try different strategies. but there are 3 maps there. So for $6, basically, you're getting access to a decent amount of gameplay, plus all future updates for Voyages, and it's an interesting idea in this world of delays and everything else, that to offer something that's really just heavily focused on, here's this deluxe-looking thing that you can print at home and deal with it yourself, but it'll be a lot cheaper, and you'll get it a lot sooner. You don't have to worry about freight costs from China or anything like that, and I'm curious to see what else it will do. Now, obviously, the downside of things like this is as soon as the files get out there at all, people can go ahead and just get it themselves. I imagine that most people who are interested in the game are willing to cough up $6. We're not talking about like pirating a $70 video game. We're talking about $6 here. So if you're interested in the game, supporting the designers here seems like an easy decision. As far as the designers are Rory Muldoon and Matthew Dunstan. Now, both of them have games under the belt. I am going to focus more on Matthew Dunstan just because I know his games a little more. I haven't played anything from Rory, but Matthew Dunstan has a bunch of games under his belt, including a variety of Extra series. He has Monumental, he has Elysium. I believe Rory Muldoon did Score over here. They both have a bunch of games under their belt, and Matthew in particular has a lot of high-rated games that I've enjoyed, that I'm fine with the designer creds, or whatever you want to call it, as far as this game. This is not someone just having an idea and throwing it up there. This seems like a game that I'm very interested in. If you want to see what map 3 is, you can go ahead and check out the update. It's, I believe, some sort of monster theme map, but for $6, you can get this roll and write experience, and yes, you will have to go through some steps to print it at home, but if you end up with a laminator, or if you already have a laminator, this, I think, is a no-brainer as far as giving you access to more roll and write goodness at an incredibly reasonable price point. Moving on, we have Harakiri. Harakiri Blades of Honor, 3,005 backers, $600,000 raised. By the time you're watching this, a day to go, basically, 24 hours or less, somewhere in that range. This is from Synerjet Games, and this is their first game, which means $600,000. That thing will probably rise to $700,000, $800,000 by the time this thing funds. That's incredibly solid for a first-time campaign. And Harakiri Blades of Honor is a combination of 2 big games. It's an exploration phase as you try to explore the map and try to go through different sequences and events and all these different things over here. And then you have, the adventure phase. I always mess up those terms. You have the adventure phase where you go ahead and do that, and then you have the exploration phase, which is more of a classic skirmish game as you try to position your people around the board and engage in the actual combat, utilizing your abilities, rolling dice, positioning yourself, dealing with the enemies. That's a very high-level overview. If you want more information, you can check out my review of the game. I go into things a bit more, or if you really want to dive into it, check out the King of Averages review, which is an hour-long deep dive into all the aspects of the game, and that's basically Harakiri Blades of Honor. Now, both of us did have some concerns about the adventure phase. We actually are very aligned with that, although it's worth noting Legion of Games really did enjoy the adventure phase, and it's worth noting even further that they've already taken that feedback into account. And if you look at the updates, they talk about how they're still keeping the core aspect of the adventure phase because many people do want it, including the designers themselves. It's their game, it's their vision. It doesn't matter necessarily if 1 or 2 people didn't feel as much for them, but they're still trying to modify and adjust it a bit to be mindful of the feedback. Things like the fact that skill checks for the game were a little bit too frequent, as far as your every move was basically move and then roll a die, move and roll a die, and doing stuff like that. So they're trying to keep the core of their game. They're not drastically changing it, which I think is a good thing. I find that I have dealt with people in the past, different designers, who are too mindful of changing their game to the newest piece of feedback, and that means you never really have a core vision around your game. I think Synerjet Games is doing exactly the right move. They're maintaining the core vision while taking into account the feedback at the same time. But past that, going into the pledge levels over here, and the pledge levels are where things get expensive for this game. You see, Harakiri Blades of Honor, it gives you a lot of game. It gives you a lot of game for this, but you're starting off with $124 for the Ronin pledge for the game. $180 will give you the Samurai Pledge, $180 will give you the Daimyo Pledge, and $225 will give you the Kami Pledge, $350 will give you the Honor Pledge, and that's the all-in for everything. So let's go ahead and see if we could find the little graph of the little handy-dandy things. Here we go. Here are the pledges you can see over here, going from price point. And the problem is they really need to change these names over here because they don't line up to the pledges. You kind of have to look at the components and go back and forth. But basically, we have the basic pledge for $124. That includes 2 full campaigns, 55 hours of gameplay. Also worth noting that the adventure phase is less present in Acts 2 of the game. So it's going to be more focused in the first part of the game. So it's not a full 50-50 split as far as the gameplay experience. So even for someone like myself or KOA who preferred that exploration phase, there's a lot more going on as far as exploration phase content. Then over here we have the multiplayer experience or the solo experience, 2 different options as far as how you expand your pledge. Those are the Samurai Pledge and the Daimyo Pledge at $180, giving you the base game plus more depending on what you're looking for. Then we have the all gameplay content for $225, giving you all the gameplay content. And we have all gameplay deluxe and lore add-ons for $350. That's a lot of money for a lot of gameplay, which is where we start scrolling down. And this, by the way, worth noting, this entire thing is Kickstarter exclusive. This game will never show up at retail. Now, it might show up on Kickstarter again, that's possible, but it'll never show up at retail. And they have a mix of stretch goals and daily goals, all the things being slowly unlocked. We have crossovers, we have Madara, we have stretch goals over here, we have Tenaris crossover, we have a Sanko Sushin crossover, we have Takashi and Final Scenarios, we have a Black Wiz Wars Rebirth crossover, whole bunch of crossovers, and another crossover coming shortly, which you may already know about by the time you watch this video. Then we have a bunch of stretch goals we have not yet unlocked, but it looks like we probably will. The Kabukiya Demon, the custom insert, that's a big one over there, the Daimyo over here in Act 2, and then a whole bunch of stretch goals we have already unlocked. Scrolling down, I'm just going to scroll through them. I'm not going to say every single one. There is going to be a bit of a graphic shortly that shows you all the stuff you're getting for your various pledges as we scroll down through a whole lot of content for this game. You see over here you have this €109, estimated MSRP is €275, which that one, I guess if you're counting stretch goals, it's not really relevant because it's not going to retail, so it's all a fictional number anyways, but it does seem a bit high in my opinion. But you do get a lot of content, a lot of miniatures, some fairly large miniatures, some gorgeous detail in the sculpts. I had a prototype and the sculpt detail was very solid there. Granted, prototype to final copies, not a guarantee, so we'll have to see. Keep scrolling through all the components, the cards, the adventures, and then the stretch goals, which start unlocking a lot of extra content for the game. You can see over here the stretch goals, the daily reveals, all these things giving you a lot of extra stuff. We have the miniature scaling over here. That dragon I've talked about in the past looks amazing. Absolutely looks phenomenal. I want that dragon in Rising Sun. Not that I have Rising Sun anymore, but I want that dragon in Rising Sun. And that's basically everything you have over here. And then we have the Kami pledges, other pledge options showing you what you can get over here, the more content, more stuff for the game. And that's basically Harakiri. There's that dragon again. That is basically Harakiri Blades of Honor in as condensed as possible. Now, short overview as far as will it hold its value, will it not, because I didn't do a full should you back it video on this one, but effectively, I think Harakiri Blades of Honor is a fairly safe bet. At the end of the day, we have 3,000 backers who are spending a decent amount of money on this game. My general rule of thumb when it comes to games like this, when it comes to miniature games, there's always a few things that I look at. One of those things is exclusivity. This game is only on Kickstarter, which means your options are secondhand market, waiting for the next Kickstarter, or right now. That's a very solid amount of reasons to already be paying attention. It's very miniature heavy. Miniature heavy games do better on the secondhand market, so I think that is already a good sign there as well. And then the third factor I would look at is the fact, because there's no past campaigns to look at with Synergic Games over here, the third factor I look at is there a demand? At the end of the day, if you're something that's exclusive to Kickstarter and you're miniature heavy, but you have 240 backers, then clearly you're failing on the demand front, which means that failure of demand will translate over to the secondhand market as well. But over here, we have 3,000 backers. This thing's not even over yet, and so I think that the demand over here is not a problem at all. I think you have a miniature heavy game, you have an exclusive game, and you have a demand heavy game, which usually all those things point to this demand carrying over to the secondhand market as people sit there and say, Harakiri Blades of Honor, I didn't even know that was a Kickstarter, and they want to pick up a copy down the road. And then of those 3,000 backers, how many of them are actually getting rid of their copies? Maybe 400, 500, 700, even if it's 1,000, as long as there's a decent amount of demand after the fact, there's a limited supply, which means it is likely one that will hold its value. Never a guarantee, especially, I mean, it's never a guarantee, period, but especially with newer creators, it's definitely never a guarantee, but I think this is likely a safe back just because of those factors over there. Moving on to 9 Minutes Kingdom, a game that was totally not on my radar, and not a surprise because this is not your classic designer game in the typical sense, and yet looking at this game, I feel certain it's a game that's good. And it's also cheap, by the way, that $11 price tag over there. 1,000 backers, $15,000, 7 days to go on 9 Minute Kingdom, and I believe this will carry through on the promise of the 9 minute experience. See, this comes with a few pledge options over here, but let's focus just on the gameplay first. The basic idea of the game is you have various goals you'll be drafting or setting up for the game. Give me 1 second, sorry. You have various goals you'll be setting up for the game, and then you have a whole bunch of cards that you'll be playing with, and you're going to be drafting them. Let me see if I can find the gameplay. You'll grab those piles of cards, you'll set up the goals, then you'll draft the cards, and you'll pick a card, you'll play it down into your kingdom, and then rinse and repeat until you've played out 9 cards into your kingdom into a 3x3 grid. Although, to be fair, I'm not certain if it has to be a 3x3 grid, but you'll play 9 cards into your kingdom. Okay, it has a picture of a 3x3 grid, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. From there, you'll look at your goals, which there's always one common goal and then a variety of variable goals, and you'll try to figure out whose kingdom best matched the goals best. And so it has drafting. It has an aspect of trying to figure out positioning and placement and trying to go for the optimal goals experience. And it's the kind of gameplay I generally like. I think this is simpler and more abstracted than other similar games that might give you that genre of experience. But overall, for the price point and the idea that, to me, this screams accessibility. In fact, let's talk about the pledge levels over here, because they have a few pledge levels. They have $5 for the print and play game. Over here, €5 for the print and play game. We have €9, which is $11 for the all-in, which gives you the base game, the stretch goals, all all that stuff. You could buy sleeves separately. They have optional buys, and this is obviously before shipping. So by the time you're done, you're probably looking at around 20 bucks, maybe more if you add add-ons. And then you have the prints over here, which is one that I'm actually considering, because the prints will give you basically not a full copy for free, but it gives you 6 copies at a discounted rate compared to buying them separately, plus once you factor in discounted shipping as well. And this looks like a great gift kind of idea. This looks like a very accessible game. It's one that I haven't played this game. It could be a complete failure, but this is one of those games where I look at it and I think to myself, maybe this won't be a game I keep. Maybe it won't. But I feel certain that this is a game that is enjoyable. The question is where and how enjoyable. But the gameplay has drafting, and it has placing things down into patterns in order to best get your goals. That kind of gameplay really resonates with me personally. I really enjoy that genre of game, and I can't imagine this would be an exception. Now, the designer does have multiple other games under his belt. I believe the other one was Suits 1, 2, and 3. Those weren't as well rated, decently rated, not as well rated. You could pick them up over here as well in the Pledge Manager, in the as you check out or whatever it is. But this is one that I've already backed it. My only question is whether I jump my pledge up to the 55 tier. Price point is reasonable, and I think this is the kind of game I can play with my children in, 9 minutes, call it 20 minutes. One of those things, it's never really 9 minutes, but call it 15, 20 minutes. I can have a good, solid, little fun game, and it's a good ramping up point both for gateway gamers, for kids, for family gamers, and it may well be enjoyable for just my game group and I as a solid filler game. So very intrigued by this one. It was not on my radar at all. This is one of those, like the checkoff chart, this is one that I just found because I did my usual end of prepping for the video and doing my last final call as I go through things, and I found this one on Kickstarter, and I was like, wow, I will jump into this one, because this, I wrote it off as soon as I saw this, but my job on these videos is not to write things off, it's to then look into it further. So while I wrote it off as one that I will cover, once I looked into it, it's one that I actually ended up backing. That's 9 Minutes Kingdom. 9 Minutes Kingdom? That bothers me. 9 Minutes Kingdom or 9 Minute Kingdom? Okay, I'm gonna lose sleep over that. 9 Minute Kingdom, right? I'm not wrong. 9 Minute Kingdom, not 9 Minutes Kingdom. 8 Minute Empire. 8 Minutes Empire? No, it's 8. It's okay. I think it should be 9 Minute Kingdom, but let me know if I'm wrong. I feel that extra S is, well, extra. In any case, moving on. It won't ruin the game for me. Moving on to Octopus Garden, a beautiful game beneath the sea. $10,000 backers would be better. 280 backers. Octopus Garden is one that was also delayed. This is from Meeple Games. They have a few games under the belt. This is one that I think, what's the other one? I'm blanking on the name of it. Either way, we'll find it later. In any case, because let's look at it now, because it's actually relevant to what I'm going to be saying over here. We have Meeple Games. Their game was Imagineers. That's what it was. So they have Imagineers, but over here, back to the Kickstarter, Meeple Games is a game of, similar to the 9 Minute Kingdom to a degree, or other games in the genre. It's one of those puzzly little games as you grab tiles from a central grid and try to place them down into your kingdom in order to score them in different ways. Different tiles will score in different ways. Different tiles will have different placement restrictions. That's the basic gameplay style. So again, it has that. It's a genre we've seen in a lot of games, and I tend to like that general puzzle. As far as the pledge levels over here, we have $30 for the game, and then we have on Kickstarter, you'll be getting these 40 wooden pearls as a Kickstarter exclusive. This game will go to retail, or should go to retail. That's the current plan. But if you want to get it on Kickstarter, what you're getting, the reason to get it on Kickstarter is because of those extra Kickstarter exclusive wooden pearls for the game as well. And the reason I say to get it on Kickstarter, because otherwise you probably should wait for retail. The MSRP of $45, while $30 sounds like a great price over there, once you factor in shipping, you're basically going to be coming within $5 of MSRP, which means the game will definitely be cheaper at retail if you're trying to get your hands on it there. Again, the only reason would therefore be the wooden pearls, and of course to support the creator and or get it earlier, and the chance that, depending on how many backers back it by the time the campaign's over, there's always a chance it doesn't actually go to retail. So I would say that in terms of pure economics of things, likely retail is the better option, but not a guarantee, and there's other factors you want to consider at the same time. As far as will it hold its value if you sell this one will unfortunately not hold its value, almost certainly not. The price point of retail versus what people are going to pay for it on Kickstarter versus looking at Imagineers and how that went in the secondhand market, I don't think there'll be enough of a demand on Octopus Garden for this one to be one that you can buy the game, find out it's not for you, and turn around and sell it for what you paid for it. You'll be able to sell it, but probably for less than what you paid for it. But overall, Meeple Garden is, I didn't heavily dive into the gameplay because I don't know the individual powers of the tiles. That's the part I don't actually know. But the general idea is, like I said, you have a central grid, you're grabbing these tiles, these various clownfish tokens, the garden tokens, the seashore, all these different tiles, and you're placing them down onto your board and creating your own layout and whatnot. There's solid testimonials, we have all-you-can borders over here. Is a deceptively Octopus's Garden. They have an extra S in the last campaign. We're missing an N over here. This is a problem. It's deceptively deep. It draws you in with its colorful and playful art style, and it provides a plethora, and provides. I don't know, Dylan, if you wrote this, Dylan, if you wrote this, we have to talk. Then again, I just called you Dylan, so maybe I shouldn't be maybe pot and kettle and black and all that. But either way, it provides a plethora of tough and engaging decisions to make. This is truly a game that is easy to learn but tough to master. Okay, so overall good testimonial, just an extra the and a missing N over there. And then again, I don't know who wrote it, but if it was from Dylan, then it wasn't caught by them. So either way, but that is everything going on with Octopus Garden. Next up, we have Borderlands Mr. Torque's Arena of Badassery. 7,360 backers, $1 million raised, 12 days to go, $1 million. So speaking of channels that have board in the name, because that was, all you can board, then we have Room and Board. I believe Room and Board has a 5 reasons you should not back Borderlands. And I recommend checking that out because I like watching 5 reasons not to back anything, especially, just from Room and Board. But either way, $1 million for Borderlands Mr. Torque's Arena of Badassery. I did a full should you back it on this game. The short version of it is this is very heavily catered towards the IP. If you're not interested in the IP, I would say that, you could get the game for sure, but if Borderlands doesn't pull you in as an IP, there's probably a few reasons to just skip on this off the bat. I think the IP and the combination of that, I don't think the gameplay is bad necessarily. I haven't played the game, unfortunately. I've played Borderlands the video game, I have not played Borderlands the board game, but the gameplay actually looks pretty solid. Learn to Play has a good video covering both sample rounds of combat as well as how to play the game, 20 and 40 minutes respectively, depending on your time. I recommend putting it on 2x speed. He doesn't talk as fast as I do, so you want to catch up over there. But either way, you're looking at Borderlands as far as being the general gameplay is you're surviving in an arena. You're going to have your weapons because you have to, it's Borderlands, and then if you're playing a campaign, you'll be buying gear in between the campaigns, you'll be trying to take out the various baddies that are heading towards you, basically rolling dice using a system that I can't remember what they call it, but Monster Fight Club has used this system in prior games, but it's a dice rolling system. You're going to be using dice that are equal to the action types you have, so the better type of action you have available, the better the dice you're rolling, and you're weighing up your stats versus the enemy stats and trying to figure out whether you win, combining your abilities, combining your weapon abilities, combining your any potential card abilities and your character abilities, and then the enemy abilities, trying to take into account all the abilities as you ultimately roll dice and take out bad guys. Then you have the arena, which is trying to basically screw with you. So there's all these arena events and sequences that are playing out in order to ensure that you're being kept on your toes the entire time as you go through each scenario. And then again, you can play campaign, leveling up your characters as you go through each one. The core pledge over here at $85 will not get you the stretch goals. So factor that in before you back this pledge. I do not recommend this pledge over here. I'd wait for retail if you're getting this pledge. But over here, the 135 pledge over here, the True Badass, this is going to give you the stretch goals, and then there are a ton of optional buys. And this is one of those campaigns where, as much as I think the game will hold its value, because I did say that in my Should You Back It, I think the IP, the miniatures, all those things I said about Harakiri apply over here as well. You have miniature heavy, you have a game that has been pulling in a ton of backers, and you have some degree of exclusivity. Not the same degree of Harakiri. So I would say, if you're comparing this to Harakiri in terms of the should you back it, should you not, Harakiri has less backers, therefore less demand. Now, 3,000 is not small, but 7,300 is certainly bigger than that, to the tune of like 2+ times bigger than that. But the flip side is Harakiri is completely exclusive, versus very few things in Borderland are exclusive, although a lot of the stretch goals are likely going to be bundled up as separate optional buys to purchase after. So it weighs out about the same, but I think it'll overall hold its value. Where I will say I'm a little bit less certain is if you look at some of the optional buys, the amount of stuff you get for the price point is not a lot, especially with scenery stuff. So as you scroll down over here, and even some of the miniatures as well, but the scenery I think was more egregious. Like, you have $30 for 6 terrain pieces that don't even look that great. Now the size, I'm glad they have that model for scale because the size is pretty decent, but it's still, they don't, like, I just don't love the design of the pieces, and then it's $30, that's $5 a piece for, it's like, to quote King of Average, you can 3D print something that looks nicer than that, and you should be fine over there. So while overall, if you're interested in the game, if you're interested in the IP, I would recommend getting it on Kickstarter as opposed to waiting around. Some of these optional buys may or may not be worth it personally, and potentially won't hold their value as well, although it's a little hard to say, because sometimes you have these things that are these extra optional buys that there are enough people who want them and fewer people who back them that they can become significantly harder to get. So I'm torn between the general model for how these things work versus the price point and design of these particular pieces that make me a little less certain. So it's not that it's a bad value or a good value, it's that I'm a whole lot less certain about some of these optional buys. And that's basically Borderlands. I won't heavily go into this one because I already did a full video on it, and like I said already, you can also check out Room and Board for 5 reasons not to back if you need someone to convince you of all the reasons you should not get this IP-based rolling dice and taking names kind of game. Rolling dice and taking names is a podcast. I don't know why they entered my vocabulary over here. Moving on. Moving on, we have one more game. We have the Palaces of Carrara 2nd Edition from Game Brewer. This is over on GameFound, 769 backers, 25 days left. This one's doing pretty decently so far. The Palaces of Carrara is a Kisling and Kramer, I believe. I keep on forgetting that one. Is it Kramer and Kisling, and it looks like there's another name there as well. Franz, I can't see over there from there. But either way, a bunch of designers on this game. This is a reprint of an original game. It's Kramer and Kisling. I don't know why there's another designer somewhere. Something I'm missing. But this is the GameFound Deluxe version of the game. Now, if you're familiar with Game Brewers, this is typical for them. What they do is they have a deluxe version of the game that's on Kickstarter on GameFound, and then they have a retail version of the game that's significantly cheaper, but doesn't have some of the deluxeifications, some of which might be gameplay, some of which might be tokens or upgrades. I don't actually know if there's any gameplay. There might not be any gameplay aspects. I think there's not, so ignore what I said there. I think Game Brewer, actually, kudos to them, generally keep their upgrades not gameplay, exclusive to just upgrades to the game. So over here, we have very clearly listed that we have not available on GameFound. The retail version of the game is completely not available on GameFound. You cannot get this here. The deluxe version of the game is only available on GameFound, so they're very clearly distinguishing that. In fact, if you go on the FAQ, they're being very clear and transparent. They're like, we're printing whatever people buy, plus 200 copies that we'll save for parts, for replacements, and selling at conventions, and we'll sell those at full MSRP. In other words, we'll be selling that at 100 or 100 euro MSRP. So if you want to get the deluxe version, your option is the secondhand market, your option is this campaign, or your option is a future campaign. That can be possible, and Game Brewer has done that before. We have Paris and the expansion to that, so you could potentially get it on a future crowdfunding campaign, but your options are those, or basically secondhand market, or going to a convention and paying the higher price point to get your hands on the game. So yes, there are options if you don't back it here, but none of them are ideal or recommended options necessarily. But your options primarily then are therefore retail, where you'll be paying roughly, that $70 MSRP means you're going to be paying roughly $50, maybe even a little less, maybe $48 for the game if you want the second edition of the Palaces of Carrara for the retail edition of the game, or you can pay €75 plus shipping, so you're looking at closer to around $100 all told for the deluxe version of the game. The deluxe version of the game will come with a bunch of extras over here. It's going to come with upgraded tokens. It's going to come with an insert. It's going to come with a whole bunch of different things. You can look for those GameFound exclusive tags to see what comes with it. But basically, you're getting a premium upgraded version of the game. Like I said already, this is standard for a Game Brewer. They offer deluxeified versions of their games at a premium price point, or you can get it at retail. And they did the whole thing of like, we sell it at retail to help fund and lower the price of the deluxe. Okay, sure, I don't know the details of that. I'm not going to heavily get involved in that, but it doesn't really matter to me. Either the deluxe is worth it or not. I don't really care about the logistics of all the other factors. As far as the Palaces of Carrara, it's a generally well-rated game. Not like amazingly well-rated and heavily sought after, but it is an out-of-print game that people pay a premium to get their hands on, so that premium price point can just be used towards a deluxe new version of the game that has updated rules as well. The general idea of the game is a combination of managing the marketplace of the building blocks and the price points there and trying to cash those in, while trying to use those for the buildings you try to build in the game, and then being mindful of when to cash things in, when to score extra points, and there's a whole bunch of modules, the advanced gameplays, and also, by the way, metal coins. I forgot about that. You also get metal coins in the deluxe version of the game, which is worth it mentioning because those can run $20, $30 on their own. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of modules as well, as far as ways to augment the game, to change up the gameplay, to give you different things to consider as you go through the game. Again, it's a well-vetted game that's been around for a long time, not amazingly well-rated, but well-rated enough that I'm not surprised that there's nearly 1,000 people backing this, and I'm sure more will be here by the end of the campaign. As far as will it hold its value or not, that is a tougher one because specifically of the Palace of Carrara. See, generally Game Brewer campaigns fall into a very specific camp. Generally, the deluxe versions of the game, if you want the game, I recommend getting it on Kickstarter, on GameFound, on wherever. But if you want to sell the game later, if you find the game, if you're worried it's not for you, and you try it, and you're like, ooh, that didn't fit myself and my game group, and you want to turn around and sell it, generally their deluxe versions of the game sell for a little bit of a loss. Not a major loss, but if you spend the $100 whatever getting it, you might be getting 85, 90 back on it. The secondhand market on their games has generally been favorable, but not like, oh my gosh, you get your money back favorable. So that's always a factor there as far as where you spend your money and which games you can cycle more easily if or when you find out they're not for you. Palaces of Carrara is a slightly different one because of the fact that the older one was out of print and people paid premium prices for that game, so I'm a little less certain. I would say that my opinion, which is still risky, keep that in mind, is that this likely falls into the category of it'll potentially get, that $100 you spend to get the game, you're looking at somewhere between 85 to 100 back on the secondhand market. I think it's slightly better than other GameFound campaigns, other Game Brewer campaigns. That's going to be confusing for me, than other Game Brewer campaigns, but I think overall it's still a decent game to buy if you're interested in it for it personally. Again, I never recommend backing games so that you can resell them. To me, it's all about the rotation. It's all about the idea that when you try a game, You want to know if it's for you or not for you, and you want to have decision space available in case you find out it's not a game for you. So this one does come with that decision space, but at a bit of a cost, $10, $15 of a price to rent and test the game, if that makes sense. But that is overall the Palaces of Carrara over on GameFound. Which brings us to picks of the week. Oh, wait, no, sorry, one important thing before we get to that. It's worth noting the price over here. Where is it? There's a price point. Let's see down here. Here we go. If you are a Game Brewer member, because they have a Game Brewer subscriber concept over here where you can basically subscribe to their games for a price point of roughly over here. For €39 a year, you can subscribe to their games, and they put out, not a guarantee, but they put out roughly 4 campaigns a year. And this is giving you basically a €19 discount off the game if you are a subscriber. The general logic of it is if you back 2 games, from Game Brewer a year, then the subscription pays for itself. And once you're backing a 3rd or 4th campaign, then the subscription is more than paying for itself. You're starting to make money or save money, or whatever you want to call it, on their campaigns. So if you're interested, you can go ahead and subscribe right now, and then go ahead and back the Palaces of Carrara, and you're basically you're going to be out €20 towards as an investment towards the next campaign in case you do or don't want those. I would say if you generally have backed or have been incentivized to back Game Brewer campaigns in the past, then it's a great deal, and also really helps with that secondhand market aspect. If you're losing $10 to $15 and you have a Game Brewer account and you're buying most of the games, it will really help you keep that cycle fresh and make easier decisions around it. So something I do recommend if you think you're going to be backing at least 2 and potentially more Game Brewer campaigns a year. Which brings us to picks of the week. Picks of the week starting, and generally I only look at new campaigns for this, so starting off from Voyages. For value pick of the week, it's a little hard. It's between Harakiri and Borderlands, but I think I'm going to pick Harakiri. The fact that more content is available for Borderlands, I'm going to pick Harakiri as my pick of the week, my value pick of the week. Generally, my value pick of the week is not the cheapest campaign, because I don't really care about that as much, but rather the game that I think is the most likely to hold its value in the secondhand market if or when you decide or find out it's not for you. I think Harakiri is likely the best value pick over here. It's always a bit nerve-wracking picking games I'm not 100% certain about, but I think it checks enough of those boxes that it will be a game that holds its value in the secondhand market. As far as my personal interest pick of the week, I'm picking Voyages. While I am intrigued very much, it's actually funny because the ones I'd pick as my personal interest are not the big ones. They're not the big campaigns. I am interested in Borderlands. I currently have a pledge. I don't know if I'm keeping it or not. We'll find out. But for me, it's 9 Minute Kingdom. I think will be solid and fun, but I'm not completely sold. For me, Voyages is my pick of the week. This is the one that I am very, very interested in. The gameplay looks compelling. The concept that they're doing, while I tend to like physical games, I'm okay enough with the fact that I'll print out a nice high quality color prototype and laminate it, that this will basically feel like a similar, it'll feel like a solid game without the box, unfortunately. I'll probably find some sort of way to print a box if I find that I like the game. If I don't find that I like the game, then I'm out a sheet of laminating paper and $6, so who really cares? But either way, Voyages is my personal interest pick of the week, the game that I am most intrigued by personally and excited to actually have this one show up. In any case, that has been a video coming in at 46 minutes, so decently long. In any case, until next time, I said in any case 3 times, that's the thing I do. I say like a lot of phrases. I say either way, in any case, until whatever, that be that as it may. No, I don't actually say that one. I say all things considered, that being said. There's a bunch of phrases I say. I can't say any phrases. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And thanks for being here, and have a good one. So, I said this in my weekend review, but let me talk a bit. I'll do a bit of spoiler stuff, because I like doing these behind-the-scenes stuff. A bit of spoiler stuff for Marvel Zombies. No, nothing spoilerific. Basically, short versions, I played Marvel Zombies. You know that campaign that I'm super excited about? I am excited about it. I'm even more excited about it now. I'm not spoiling anything as far as anything past my opinion, but I've had the chance to play 2 games of Marvel Zombies so far, and hopefully we'll be playing more. On TTS only, so factor that in, although in my opinion TTS only makes things worse, so the fact that I enjoyed Marvel Zombies as much as I did is a very, very good sign. Now for context, Black Plague has been my favorite Zombicide campaign version of the game for a long time. And I played Invader, and from the very first play of Invader I was like, this is fun, I prefer Black Plague. Then I played Undead or Alive, I think that was the next one I played, and for my very first play of Undead or Alive, I was like, that was fun, it was better than Invader. I still prefer Black Plague. Then I played 2nd edition, and I was like, that was also fun. Campaign stuff, new things, I like it. I think I prefer Undead or Alive to you, And that should tell you that, yes, I still prefer Black Plague. Black Plague has been the gold standard for me in Zombicide games ever since I've, well, played Zombicide games. All other Zombicide games I've enjoyed, but have not kept. And then I played Marvel Zombicide, Marvel Zombies, and mid-game, when asked by people who knew I was in the game, I said I would get rid of Black Plague to keep Marvel Zombies. Now, to be clear, to be very clear, I'm not saying that Black Plague is better or worse. I am saying that I do like the Marvel IP, and I've played like 30, 40 games of Black Plague already, so there is that newness bias towards something new, but I would keep Marvel Zombies over Black Plague if you forced me to choose. Now, I'm keeping both, to be very clear. Black Plague's not going anywhere, but if you force me to choose, I would keep Marvel Zombies. I have complaints about some things I would want to see differently, but overall, the changes, the public changes that they've announced, I'm not giving any spoilers here, there are spoiler stuff, but I'm not going to talk about them, but the public changes that they've talked about in the game all add to the experience, in my opinion. They are solidly well done. My biggest concern that the game would be not difficult enough, that is not a problem. From the two games, one we escaped at the very, we almost died 14 times in that game. The other game, we almost died 14 times and then did die. The good news is if you watch the first gameplay, if you watch of the two gameplays now, when you watch one, the first one will be a spoiler for you because all you know about both of them is that we almost died multiple times. You don't actually know which one we won or not. The problem is when you watch the second gameplay, then you'll know. But yeah, I really liked it. And I don't think I'm just being biased by the Marvel IP. The Marvel IP is a factor, do not get me wrong. At the end of the day, having abilities tied to the characters in the Marvel Universe, and again, I'll just say things that they've publicly said, but having, Doctor Strange come in as an abomination and start having a mobile spawn zone that you now have to deal with, and those spawn zones are not pretty, that is both thematically cool and hard, and I like that. But I don't think it's just the IP. I think I really, really like the system. And I'm very excited to see, for me, I'm getting rid of Invader. It's over. It's not a question. And Undead or Alive, I'm going to play it when it arrives because I can't not play it more and see exactly where the system goes. But for me, I think the gold standard is now Black Plague and Marvel Zombies. Just saying. And again, I am a Command fanboy. That's true. But keep in mind that for the last several campaigns, Black Plague has still remained my gold standard. This is the first time that's actually changing. And if anything, by the way, I thought this would be the one time it was guaranteed not to. Until I watched their gameplay changes, when I first found out Marvel Zombicide, I was both simultaneously ridiculously excited and expecting to have to house rule the heck out of it to make it work. I was expecting that, and I don't think I need to. That's it. That's the behind-the-scenes spoiler for today. Yeah, that's it. Have a good one.